Whether you've just started teaching or spent decades in the classroom, you know there's always more to learn. But where do you start? Well, here at Hillsdale College, we have the answer for you. Tried and True, a primer on sound pedagogy by Hillsdale College professor Daniel Copeland. In this little book, you'll read lessons from more than 25 years of Dr. Copeland's classroom experience. It's all distilled into 14 easy-to-read chapters on lesson planning, assignments, and classroom management, and it will help you improve your skills and inspire you as a teacher, one of our most important professions. Whether you've been in front of the classroom for years, or this is your first year, when you read Tried and True, you'll find something to help you keep improving every single day. You don't need to go at it alone. Let Dr. Copeland's real-world experience encourage you and inspire you. You can get your copy today at hillsdale.edu/true. That's hillsdale.edu/TRUE. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. Thanks for listening. We're joined by Dr. Christopher Matsos. He is Chairman and Associate Professor of Theater at Hillsdale College. Dr. Matsos, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.
Talking today about building a school theater program. Let's talk first about why you might want one. What role does a drama program play in classical education?
I am biased on this question, but I think it can play a very critical role. And we look at theater and we look at the history of theater and we see it going back to the beginning and all of the places and all of the moments that are hallmarks in the things that we value culturally and spiritually and socially. Theater was there and was a big part of it. And we look back to the Greeks and the founding of democracy, and theater was a major facet of Greek culture. And we see it in the Middle Ages. The church used theater to educate people about biblical narratives when they couldn't read. And in the Renaissance, they founded academies, humanist academies, in order to study Greek and Roman literature that they had rediscovered from the ancient past. And so it's kind of been there all through this Western trajectory. And so if we look at the reason that we have this wonderful network of schools right now, that's right in line with that kind of trajectory. So I think that theater is a vehicle. It's a tool. It can be about anything. And so it can be about the ideas we value. And I think it's right at the heart of what we do. It's beautiful. And beautiful things point us to what is true and what is good. And so I think that it fits very well in what we're doing. And we happen to, in the K through 12 curriculum, we study so many of the plays anyway that are a big part of theater history. And so I think a natural and good step for many schools as they develop is to start something like a drama program where they bring these shows to life in some way, whether in the classroom or a theater club or as a performance for their communities.
So you mentioned some of these plays might be read in a literature class or an English class. What is that difference between reading and performing a work?
I really wish we had with us here the 15 students I just worked with from Hillsdale Academy. We performed a 30-minute excerpt of Julius Caesar the other night. And we did a 2-week workshop with them where we did a deep dive into the play. And after one of the performances, a student said, "Can you imagine if every literature course was on its feet like this?" And I don't, in no way do I mean to disparage those who would teach literature in a traditional way. But when there are opportunities to do something on its feet through various activities or just reading it, an embodiment of a character or of a scenario brings it to life in a way that the student will not forget. And so I think it's just a kind of a quantum leap in their experience that leaves an indelible mark.
There are schools that are de-emphasizing, or perhaps don't have a drama program. What are they missing out on?
There are so many schools that are cutting drama around the country, and I understand that, and I can understand why. When you run out of money, or you run out of sometimes people lose interest, or the emphasis goes to other activities. But that also reveals something of a misunderstanding about the role of theater. So when we think of theater only as an entertainment activity, when people mistakenly try to recreate something that maybe they've seen in a Broadway show, or a Broadway tour has come through their town and they think they need to recreate that standard, that is unnecessary. They don't need that. What you do is you start with a text, and the text leads the performance. You don't need much of anything. You don't need fancy lights or costumes, and so you can do it with relatively little. We've done a couple years now of Shakespeare performances with Hillsdale Academy, and we have very decidedly set ourselves a $150 budget, and we've stuck to that both years. So we've tried to demonstrate that you can do theatrical activity with almost nothing, and that's what Shakespeare himself did. They had a few costumes and a bare stage, and so I think that those schools that would lose the drama program, I mean, if I was, running a school and a drama teacher was asking me for, $50,000 to run a program, I would want to cut it too. But a drama program really can be free, and the value that we gain from this kind of engagement of students and ownership of a text, that's a thing that we get that we don't always get just by reading a text, and it's too valuable really to miss.
So there are schools perhaps who are looking to begin a program like this. There's a lot of angles to consider when it comes to producing plays. How would someone know where to start? We talked a little about how to perhaps do it without having to invest a lot of money, but where do you begin this process?
Different teachers are beginning it in different ways. And what's really lovely about this particular moment is that we're seeing your question answered very organically and very practically by teachers everywhere. So some have a bit of theater experience and are just doing what they can to stage shows. Others are starting in the classroom, or with once a week or bi-weekly after-school drama clubs. And then after a bit of time, those evolve, gain enough interest that they're going to attempt a production. Other schools have done 4 or 5 shows now. At Hillsdale, we're trying to help by, we've adapted Shakespeare into 60-minute versions we have 4 or 5 of them available to the Classical School Network. That those are very easy to tackle, whether you have experience or not. And so I would just encourage people to look toward those. And I am on the advisory board for the K-12 network. If anyone has questions, they're always welcome to contact me, and they do. And we spend a lot of time on the phone talking through problems. So in other words, there are resources to help, but it need not be grand in its beginning. It can be really very modest, and often that's the way I would recommend that it begins. Some people are doing cafeteria, little showcases in the cafeteria. Some are doing outdoor work after school, almost like whatever those flash mobs used to be, just sort of Shakespeare or a Greek tragedy, 15-minute performance in the middle of a field. So it really depends. And there's a famous old story. I don't know if it was I don't know what its origin was. That's called Stone Soup. That's this kind of parable almost about, people come into a town and there's no food, and they say, well, we'll make you, no food, fine, we'll make stone soup. And they throw some rocks in a pan and start making, stone soup, which obviously isn't a real thing. And little by little, people from the town come and say, well, I'll give you some potatoes, I'll give you some carrots. And pretty soon a whole feast has happened. And I sometimes use that illustration to say, all you really have to do is say, we're here to make something, and it's based on something that's very important to our curriculum. It's for our students. It's not for any kind of, I don't know, glory or spectacle. And then people will show up. People will come and say, oh, I have some old lighting instruments I'd like to donate. I have some costumes, or I have some time I could volunteer. So sometimes those added accoutrements kind of come along. But really the best way to begin is just by beginning. Yeah.
Talking to Christopher Matsos from Hillsdale College about building a school theater program. How would you, this varies based on length of what you're trying to accomplish, but when it comes to discussing the time commitment needed on behalf of the actors who are taking part, what does that look like? How does that compare to, say, an athletic commitment? And is there sometimes a little friction between people who, I'd love to do this, but I'm also doing Y, right?
Yes, that is a concern. And a lot of times, since some of the schools we work with are pretty small or new, and the population might be kind of still growing. And so we do begin with that problem where it's sort of like the first thing. I was joking with some of the teachers the other day that the track team is often founded before the school is founded. It's like the track team is there so early because it's a very manageable kind of sport to begin. So a lot of the time they say, well, I wanted to do this, but it interferes with this. So what I say is, for a couple of years now, to answer that question for myself, I've done a very short 30-minute presentation of a Shakespeare play with Hillsdale Academy students. And for those, what we did is a total of 20 hours. So we did Monday through Friday, 10 to noon. So we did 10 hours a week, and then took the weekend off, and then did 10 more hours. And out of that, we were able to do at least 30 minutes, maybe more. And that might just be where a school is. It might be that we're going to do, 30 minutes of something on an evening with only 10 rehearsals, or however it can happen. So it can be very conducive to the busy lives and schedules of students and of the teachers. That's the other consideration, is sometimes the drama person is the track coach too. And so it can happen with very little. And then as the schools grow, we find that a kind of new consideration happens where they're splitting. And now some students have to kind of identify which area they wish to pursue a little more seriously. But that's a good problem to have. And that comes along as well.
As you are recruiting and encouraging students to take part in a school theater program, I imagine there are some who are wary of the memorization, and also the fact that, unlike cross country, if you screw up in cross country, you harm your own time. If you screw up in a theater performance, there are other people who are relying on you to continue to have the lines right, to move that performance forward. Are those sometimes hurdles when dealing with students who express some interest in taking part?
Yes, I think there is a different set of anxieties that can come with acting that don't always come on an athletic field or playing a musical instrument, although those have theirs as well. I remember being terrified as an athlete as a kid. So, but yeah, I mean, well, again, my most immediate experiences of the brief Shakespeare pieces we've done, and we as the adults are often staggered at the speed at which students memorize things. We gave them a short script of 20 pages on a Friday, and the following Friday they performed it. And we had very few line issues. But, we can also do things like where we say, okay, this is our first production, and we're just figuring this out. We're going to have someone sit in the front row with the script, and if we really get off track, they're going to correct us. Mm-hmm. That's how it happened for most of history. So it's probably okay to do that. But yes, those are certainly concerns, but they shouldn't be anything that dissuades people from giving it a try. It's a little bit of a leap of faith. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like once you're up there and you've done it, you realize that messing up a line doesn't really matter. It's sort of amazing, but we'll have students who, will get off track with a script and are suddenly maybe paraphrasing, but going right along with Shakespeare. So if you could do that, you can do kind of anything.
If people are looking to start something like this, are there particular works that you recommend that are easier to access, but also satisfying to perform for students?
Like I said, we're trying to do our best. The K through 12 office has really identified Shakespeare, since it's in the curriculum so much anyway, mm-hmm. And since it's done and the time is already carved out in the classroom space to look at Shakespeare. That's kind of like why not? You have the track team, you do the Shakespeare. That's kind of what we've done. But there have been a lot of works that other schools are doing that are classics. We have a school that's about to do The Matchmaker by Thornton Wilder. We have people who have done musicals pretty successfully, other classics like Cyrano de Bergerac. I really suggest that people look more toward older and mm-hmm. kind of time-tested pieces rather than go for brand new things. Sometimes students hear about a musical that's brand new and say, we can do that. And maybe you will be able to, but I think that it's best to do, there are untold riches in the classics that people often overlook in their rush to get to what's new. So that's kind of where I'd go. And there are, for people who have not directed plays very much, the best resources out there also happen to be in specifically how you direct Shakespeare mm-hmm. or a Greek tragedy or maybe a 19th century play. And so that's kind of what I recommend, because that's probably the easiest way to get started.
For schools that might not be quite ready for a dedicated drama program, are there ways that theater still can enrich a routine classroom experience?
Yes, absolutely. I was really blessed some years ago to work for about a year or two with this theater company in the UK called the Royal Shakespeare Company, and they have this amazing education department. And so I and my wife and several colleagues where we were working at the time had this great exposure to a variety of activities. And those are now, they used to be very exclusive and in a book that was published, and those are now just widely available. So people can look up the Royal Shakespeare Company Education Department and find a number of activities dedicated to any kind of, all of Shakespeare's plays, but other, literary works as well. Mm-hmm. that you can just do in the classroom. And really the first step is as simple as pushing the desks aside and making some open space and standing. And as soon as that act is engaged, and even one activity is tried that tackles a text on your feet, a new level of engagement happens that it's going to be a bit hard to go back, after that as students and as teachers. And so really it's that simple. And people usually love it so much that it's all they can do to get more of that kind of thing in their classrooms.
Dr. Christopher Matsos, he is Chairman and Associate Professor of Theater here at Hillsdale College as we talk about building a school theater program. Dr. Matsos, thanks so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
Thank you very much.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K12. Hillsdale_K12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.